This is really big. The former PayPal CEO says that the US should sell gold and pump that money into Bitcoin because Bitcoin has way better properties. Selling a percentage of gold, shifting that into Bitcoin, and creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We also see Cynthia Loomis confirming that Operation Chokepoint 2.0 is officially over. And with that, she also confirms that the banks are finally coming to an end, and at the same time, Bitcoin can really take off now. And then we have high net worth asset manager Michael Sonnenfeld bullish on Bitcoin. He confirms this in a live interview. We need to take a look at this because it's highly explosive. But let's start from the very beginning. David Marcus is the former CEO of PayPal. In the meantime, he has started his own Bitcoin company, Lightspark, because he realized that the whole fiat thing isn't that great after all. He wants to focus on Bitcoin instead, and he has a ton of really cool innovations in the works. Now he definitely sees the need for the US to build massive Bitcoin reserves. He would rather get involved with Bitcoin here. Check out what he has to say here on live TV. Because he not only wants to buy Bitcoin, but also sell gold.
Well, look,
besides push up the price of Bitcoin.
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at the strategic reserves that the U.S. government holds in gold, we're the number one holder of gold in the world. And arguably, if you think of Bitcoin as a better version of gold, digital gold, why not allocate a portion of that reserve or rebalance a portion of that reserve to the better version? I think, there's just a lot more opportunity for growth and appreciation of Bitcoin than gold in the next couple of decades. So I think it's a wise decision, potentially.
That's a really strong statement. The US is the largest holder of gold in the world. But if Bitcoin is a better version of digital gold, wouldn't it make sense to reallocate some of the reserves to the superior asset? But I keep saying it over and over. Hey, gold is cool. Have gold, that way you can maintain your purchasing power. But only in relation to fiat currencies. If you basically hold gold and measure it in Bitcoin, then you're going to get massively poorer. In the end, it's all just a matter of denomination. I'm not against gold or anything. I still think gold is cool. You can also have gold if, for example, you're worried that Bitcoin might fail. That's about 1 to 2%. There's probably the risk that Bitcoin could fail. Then you also have gold on top of that. That's not even a topic or anything. Gold has also been a very, very good store of value over the centuries. But right now, we have the tendency for Bitcoin to appreciate massively, and gold just can't keep up. Sure, gold is currently at an all-time high. Gold looks a bit better in terms of performance right now, but those are always just the short-term timeframes. Long-term, Bitcoin has always performed way, way better. And I also expect that in the next 20, 30, 100 years, Bitcoin is going to totally outpace gold. So in the end, David Marcus's statement makes complete sense. Hey, gold is cool, we have reserves here. The risk-reward ratios with Bitcoin just look way, way better than with gold. And why shouldn't we take our gold reserves, sell off a bit, and then swap that into Bitcoin? Because in the end, the USA is kind of like an investment case or something. You basically have to reassess your investment every day. You always have to check, okay, has the investment case changed? And now it is just like this. With gold, we naturally have a certain security that somehow goes back centuries, millennia, a long history. But we just don't have the upside potential that we have with Bitcoin. On top of that, we don't have the other features like the incredible censorship resistance that Bitcoin has. With gold, that's also the case, but not as intensely as with Bitcoin, where it's verifiable, decentralized, that it's easier to send, better, building pieces, and so on. We just don't have all those advantages with gold. Also, it's not limited. Bitcoin is limited. Bitcoin is designed to still exist in 1,000 years. Gold doesn't hold up, because with technological progress, it's becoming easier and cheaper to mine gold. And that's why he clearly says, hey, if we're smart, we need to take our gold and sell off a bit of it. We don't have to sell everything off and swap all of it into Bitcoin, but it goes even further, and here it basically addresses how all of this is supposed to be financed.
Taxpayers would pay for this?
Well, I think that, if you reallocate from the existing reserve, it doesn't necessarily have to be, an increase in tax burden for the American taxpayer.
There has been some view that there's been Bitcoin that's been confiscated that would go into this reserve?
Yes, I think that would be, in my opinion, a first good step. The U.S. government has been selling on the market seized Bitcoin as part of law enforcement activities. And I think that as a first step, like not selling the seized Bitcoin would be a good conservative baby step in the right direction.
The wildest scenario would be that the US starts printing its own money to buy Bitcoin. But we really have to start small. I really don't think it's going to happen with the sale of gold, because you really need to have majorities here, and so on. And just because a few people are saying this, and of course I would like it, I think it would be cool if gold were sold and Bitcoin were bought with it. But that's just my own investment perspective. I totally get that a lot of gold enthusiasts might have a problem with that. And then it basically happens against the will of the people. And I also know that perhaps very, very many politicians are gold bugs and that it is then difficult to change people's minds. And above all, you have to say that gold isn't a bad store of value either. You really have to ask yourself, do you have any junk lying around in your portfolio? Or could you take some money that's just going to waste somewhere, like in the US or whatever, and instead of letting it get lost in bureaucratic nonsense, use it to invest in Bitcoin? The option to create more wealth here really raises the question of whether that's something people want. And now we have another interesting statement from Senator Cynthia Lummis, who also wants to sell off gold. She even says, sell all the gold. Sell everything here, put it all into Bitcoin, the gold certificates, sell it all. Check out what she says here, also in a TV interview on Fox. And this is about Operation Chokepoint 2.0, which is the systematic shutdown of banks and the systematic targeting of people who have done something with Bitcoin, and then to exclude them from the banking system.
So these were federal regulators, unelected bureaucrats going after bank customers, choosing who could have a bank account, who couldn't, which businesses were going to have to go out of business because these little bank examiners didn't like the business. Yeah. So we know the government was part of it. We need to find out further whether the banks themselves were part of it or whether the debanking was actually directed by the executive branch of our government.
So you confirm here quite clearly that Operation Chokepoint 2.0 took place and that it was ultimately a huge mess. Here, in the end, people were targeted who had anything to do with Bitcoin or crypto. And she's now also stepping up to find out who the culprit was. So she clearly says here that it was the government that was involved. But we need to find out if it was just the government, just the state, or if maybe whether banks were also involved or if the banks were pressured. For example, they might have been told, like Mark Zuckerberg, hey, either you censor for us now, or we'll shut down your banks, we'll take your platform down, and so on. So both governments basically censored social media here. And just as social media was censored here, the same thing happened against banks. And the banks then took action against the companies again, and the companies then had huge problems again. And that ultimately led to banks failing because Silvergate and Silicon Valley Bank went under. And this was triggered by the fact that the banks were basically taken down by both governments. And then there was a chain effect. First, one bank collapsed, then the next bank collapsed, and so on. And these are ultimately things that needed to be addressed now. And I've mentioned this in another video, that there were attempts to cover up these documents, this Operation Chokepoint 2.0 stuff. There was also a very, very famous interview with Mark Andreessen on Joe Rogan, where he uncovered all of this. And a lot of people reached out about that. Because a lot of people didn't even dare to come forward and say that the banks were being shut down. If you had to expect even more reprisals. And that's basically what this is about. And at the same time, this means that when Operation Chokepoint 2.0 is over, as Donald Trump also said, hey, it's the end of all this censorship stuff and so on. Then this is the door that's being opened here for Bitcoin, for freedom. And that's basically what's important now. So Bitcoin needs not just the confirmation that we are not only advocating for Bitcoin, but also standing up against the fight against Bitcoin. And we can also see that more and more of the Elizabeth Warrens and people like that have less and less to say. And you have to give Donald Trump some credit for going after the people who are against Bitcoin or crypto. And that is very much tolerated by both governments. And now it's absolutely over, that's it. And now we have a really huge statement here from Michael Sonnenfeld. The founder of Tiger 21 is an asset manager for high net worth individuals, so people who have a lot of money. Check out what you all have to say about Bitcoin and what's coming our way.
You know, obviously, the areas of digital currencies remain really exciting. We have some members who are all in. It's become a gold substitute. Gold isn't an inflation hedge. It's an instability hedge. There's a lot of instability around the world, and people think that in America, they're concerned about it. But if you live in Argentina or Lebanon or any of countries that are under risk, Bitcoin is taking on a new role. So we have about 1 to 3% of 200 billion in assets, so about 6 billion in assets in digital currency. Gold is for traditionalists, and Bitcoin is a little new age, but they often play the same role. They're perceived as storehouses of value that are not subject to government fiat. When you get out of that, when you have a truly global market like that, people feel like there's some real refuge.
Rich people are ultra bullish on Bitcoin. He also touches on the gold topic again, saying that Bitcoin has similar properties to gold. But Bitcoin can be more interesting for the new folks. So gold is for the traditional folks here. Bitcoin is for the, let's say, the cool people just putting it out there, for the new folks. Of course, young people can have gold too. There's nothing wrong with that. And in the end, the most important statement here is that he says gold is not an inflation hedge, but a hedge against instability. And that's exactly how it is with Bitcoin. And that's basically exactly what Larry Fink says. And what's interesting is that this realization is happening simultaneously for a lot of people. You notice that Bitcoin is especially strong in unstable countries, like when there are crises or problems, or when people get excluded from the banks and so on. This means that if everything goes reasonably well, then you don't necessarily need Bitcoin. But if things don't go so well, then Bitcoin is the life insurance here. And that's why it's important to have at least small allocations. They say you should allocate 1 to 3% to Bitcoin, and that's basically it. If you are heavily involved in Bitcoin, please feel free to subscribe here. It's absolutely important that we gain more traction. But we have to keep in mind, these are huge sums. So that 1 to 3% amounts to 6 trillion from the asset management companies.
That's actually 6 billion, not 6 trillion.
And that's basically the crazy part about the pension funds and so on. They don't need to have high allocations. It's enough if they have 2%, 3%, 1%, or even 0.5% or something like that. If all these big asset managers have 0.5% Bitcoin allocations, that makes a huge difference. And now I would definitely recommend you, if you're bullish on Bitcoin, check out the link down below. I'll put one in for you. 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Let me know what you think about the massive statements. Peace out.